Make your next vacation unforgettable. On Royal Caribbean's newest ship, Star of the Seas, it's everything you've loved about every family vacation you've ever been on, with mind-blowing thrills at the largest water park at sea, 7 onboard pools for every level of chill, more than 40 ways to dine and drink, and even more to enjoy at our award-winning private island, Perfect Day at Coco Cay. This is the new Star of the Seas. Click or tap the banner to find out more.
It's Wednesday, Addams. I see you're trying to distract yourself from your own banal thoughts. Let me help. Here's a recording thing made of my latest root canal.
Wednesday Season 2 is now playing only on Netflix.
Today on What the Heck with Adam Levin, we're joined by Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Sara Ganim and award-winning showrunner Karen Given.
They're the hosts of Believable, a new podcast that explores how one person's inspirational rise to internet fame came crashing down in a flaming wreck of lies.
And we also talk about what we can learn from her story.
Welcome to What the Hack, a show about hackers, scammers, and the people they go after. I'm Adam Levin.
I'm Beau Friedlander.
And I'm Travis Taylor.
Sara, Karen, we are so happy to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having us.
So happy to be here.
We're very excited. So where are you coming to us from right now?
I'm in New York, Lower Manhattan.
And I'm outside of Boston.
All right, so we have a decidedly East Coast presence.
Yes, for a West Coast story.
You have a new podcast out called Believable, and I've actually listened now to 3 episodes, and they're terrific. But what can you tell our listeners about it?
Our podcast is about a woman who told the world that she is a survivor of child sex trafficking. She told the world that she was a Mormon. She told the world that she was a member of the LGBTQ community, and she might not be any of those things.
Her name is Coco, which I think is just the cutest name, first of all. Is it a nickname? No, it's not.
She was internet famous.
She was. Oh, wow.
She was an influencer.
For a while, it seemed like Coco Berthmann was everywhere.
I'm here with an incredible woman, an incredible survivor and advocate, Coco Berthmann.
And with every interview, Coco's influence grew.
She, and when you say an influencer, for real, she was a real influencer. She had a following. She had people who were really interested in the story.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. You know, I would say like she was within a pocket, like certain pockets more well-known than within other, you know, there are people certainly who haven't heard of her. She wasn't like a household name, even in within a certain generation. But she certainly, like within Utah, within the LDS community, I think within the sex trafficking, anti-sex trafficking and advocacy world, she was a rising star.
What did she use her internet fame to do? Was it advocacy, or was she using it to build an empire?
I mean, in theory, she was an advocate. And we talked to a lot of people who said that she could have done very, very good work as an advocate because she was well-spoken and she was telling a story that was heartbreaking and got people's attention. The problems were many, though, right? As it went along, it was pretty clear that her main goal was probably to be famous, or at least to get a whole lot of attention, both on sort of a public scale and a personal scale. And so the community that she was advocating for is actually the community that feels most hurt by what she did, both in how she treated them, how she presented this thing that she was advocating for, and ultimately the betrayal of all of the lies that she told in doing that.
Yeah, I think that that community also was among the first to call her out. And it's interesting, like they saw some of the red flags before many others did, in part because of how she was treating them. The so-called advocacy, like I think it was very surface level, and they saw through that really, really quickly.
So can you describe for us what she was like online as an internet famous person?
She was exactly what you would expect of a 20-something who's trying to be kind of fabulous on Instagram. Beautiful, but also like glammed up, lots of drama. She made a lot of smart social media choices in how she got people's attention. She was a good storyteller. She was kind of like typical influencer. I mean, this is me speaking as an old lady millennial looking at this generation of Instagrammers that are much better at it than I am. To me, it was what you might imagine if you were to like create a very generic like fill in the blank influencer. She was very, very good at telling a story that was very, if it was completely true, would have been very, very painful. And she could do it very bluntly with a lot of detail, but still in a compelling way.
The story that she told was that she had been born and raised in Germany and that she had been sex trafficked by her mother for the first 15 years of her life. And then she had escaped in the middle of the night while listening to a Celine Dion song. It was all very, very beautiful. She had escaped and gone to a clinic for traumatized children. And then when she got out of that clinic, she said that she had been basically duped by a therapist into moving in with him and starting a romantic relationship with him. And then he held her captive for the next 2 years. Right. So the story just keeps growing and growing. And I think it's very important for survivors for us to say, like, the things that Coco said happened to her do happen to people. They just maybe didn't all happen to this one person from Germany.
How large was her internet following?
I think it's hard to tell exact numbers because she deleted so many of her accounts. I think the most she had about 60,000 Instagram followers. TikTok, I'm not sure because that got deleted. She had a pretty big following and she was growing at the time that she got caught, right? So she had just done a TEDx talk. She had just appeared on a couple of pretty big podcasts. And so her influence was growing when she got caught.
A lot of this sounds like kind of has the same sort of tone as young adult literature that I remember my older sister used to read a lot of, just kind of being that really grim and dark and heavy stuff. But I think one of the main questions I have is, how did she start to construct the narrative? Was it exclusively through social media, or was it offline through her community in Utah that she relocated to?
I think she definitely created the story in private. Karen said these things happen to people. They're real things that do happen, but we don't necessarily think they happen to her. I think I would add to that, like, it would be a rare instance that all of these things would happen to one person. So, of course, these kinds of things, the stories that she was telling are real events that happened to people.
Was there a specific moment when Coco started sharing this version of the story?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a hard thing to pinpoint because it sort of requires us to decide when she started making things up. She started telling people bad things were happening to her when she was pretty young. When she was a teenager, she was hospitalized for mental health issues and certainly started making allegations around that time.
And we should say that everyone we've talked to who knew Coco, they all say, well, I don't believe that story anymore, but I still believe that something happened to this woman. That she is, in fact, showing true signs of PTSD, true signs of disassociation, true signs of having had some traumatic event in her past, and we just don't know what exactly that is. So when we talk about her younger days, we can't be sure whether what she was saying at that point was made up or whether it was real.
This sounds like really difficult territory to navigate for a journalist, because on the one hand, you have somebody who's lying, and on the other, you have somebody who's a victim or mentally ill or both. So, how do you navigate those waters?
really carefully. We had so many discussions about this. I mean, we still have discussions about this. I personally felt really strongly that should be something that we deal with, should be something that we deal with carefully, but it shouldn't mean we're not telling the story, because I think that there's a lot to benefit from telling the story.
I remember one of the first drafts I wrote of episode 3 was an entire draft of like, child sex trafficking is real. I don't want this story to further injure people who actually went through the abuse that Coco says she went through, right? And so for me, a big part of it was talking to survivors and getting their point of view on what had happened. But it's really important to me to like make sure that that through line comes through, because we have such a tendency, I think, and it's been a great push in the world, right? Where we said, our tendency is going to be to believe people who tell us that they're survivors, right? We're going to believe survivors of rape. We're going to believe survivors of abuse. We're going to believe them because that's what we need to do. And I don't want this podcast to change that. However, some fact checking can be in order, especially when a story is this intense, especially when it starts to change, especially when the person can be seen as trying to turn that story into a monetizable career. I think then some fact checking can really come into play.
She's made up her mind to live pretty smart, learn to budget responsibly right from the start. She spends a little less and puts more into savings, keeps her blood pressure low and credit score raises. She's cutting debt right out of her life. She tracks her cash flow on a spreadsheet at night.
Boring money moves make kinda lame songs, but they sound pretty sweet to your wallet. PNC Bank, brilliantly boring since 1865.
Right now, at the Home Depot, you'll find storage solutions made to fit your needs. Grab an HDX Tough Tote to protect your tools. Or keep your sports equipment contained with reinforced snap-fit lids. Or stack up and make better use of your space with bins and totes built to last. Whatever you're storing, we've got the gear to keep it organized and protected at the Home Depot. How doers get more done.
You said that, her goal was to be famous. What role did money play in all of this, or did it play a role in any of this?
I mean, money certainly was something we all need, right?
Yeah,
so it's not a factor. Part of the scam was monetary. That's arguably how she got caught, and why she's facing the most serious of her consequences, which aren't really that serious, but the criminal charges that she faced were about the money, yes. But I think when we started talking to people who were who knew her and consider themselves to be victims of her, they don't talk about the money. They talk about the emotional scam and what they lost, what they personally lost to them. We had to sort of ask about the money. Okay, like, what did you give her? How much did you spend? That's not the first thing they say to us. The first thing they say is, I've lost my ability to trust people. I've lost my will to help people. They were emotionally pained by what she put them through. So I think it was, for a long time, we thought this was mostly an emotional scam.
Well, so for a long time, I thought she was scamming for love. And not romantic love, but like the love of a mother. She very much goes after women and mothers and people who are her mother's age. But I think it's just attention. She needs to be the center of everything. So fame is part of that. But really, if you're one-on-one with her, she needs to make sure that you're not thinking about anyone else or anything else. And I think when people were talking to us, right, Sarah's right, they never mentioned the money. And I think that's part of why they didn't realize they were being scammed, is she didn't have her hand out the whole time and say, I need money. And when she did, it was something specific, like, my car broke down. What am I going to do? It was always something like that. And so I think they just gave of themselves until there was nothing left. And so there were serious financial consequences for these people, right? So like some of them lost their careers, like their livelihoods, right? Like there were serious consequences. And Coco did make money, right? She's still, I think, making money. But it doesn't feel right to call it a purely financial scam. It's so much deeper than that.
Yeah, I also began to feel that maybe part of the mental illness part of the story was her inability to feel anything, and that some of the things that she was doing were just so that she could feel something. There's some of the stuff, it's beyond just telling crazy stories. It really gets dark in the way that she treats other people. And so I started to think that maybe it was a form of self-harm almost, just to have some sort of, to try to have some sort of emotion. I mean, she clearly does not interact with people the way that we consider functioning humans to interact with people.
Well, that's pretty interesting. Money for some people is proof of love. Give me money, show me that you care. We've seen a lot of those scams over time.
Yeah.
We've seen that. I don't know if we even call those scams. I call that some familial relations.
And yeah, so she was taking anything that could show that you cared, right? Your money, your time, your affection, your time away from your family, your time away from your job. She was keeping people up in the middle of the night with fake emergencies, anything that she could take from you.
I'm sad. I'm officially sad. I'm sad for her. I'm sad for everyone, but I'm sad for Coco.
For a long time when we're working on this, we had this whole sad puppy theory, right?
Yeah,
Coco's just a sad puppy, and it's got to be really hard to be her, right? Yeah. But when you really dig into some of these things that she's doing, and when you hear about what happens when she gets caught, you realize she's not a sad puppy. She knows exactly what she's doing. She knows the difference between right and wrong.
Right.
And she does this again and again because she's getting something out of it.
I get what you're saying about Coco, but when I'm listening, I hear borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder, some kind of deep neurosis that I'm just curious. Do you guys go down the rabbit hole? Do you speak to psychologists?
We do.
Yeah. What did you find out?
There's definitely evidence of a diagnosis. There's definitely evidence of the things you're mentioning. And then we talk to an expert who explains that a little bit more. And I want to say that you said you officially feel sad. I mean, there were many moments where I had a lot of empathy for her. And it wasn't just learning about her childhood or trying to somehow get into her mind in order to explain some of these things. So I definitely had a lot of moments where I felt bad for Coco, but I have to say, we talked to 40 people or something, right, Karen? On the record, and then an additional, probably the same number off the record or on background. A lot of people. I felt more bad for them, and I felt that bad as at the moments where I felt the worst for her, I still also didn't feel like any of it was an excuse for how she treated those other people that we talked to. Mm-hmm. And I never felt like she was doing everything that she could possibly do to better herself and to stop this situation. In the end, the scales were definitely tipped for me in favor of the people who were harmed here.
It sounds like you obviously have spoken with a lot of people about this, but what, if any, was your interaction with Coco?
Very minimal. Just a couple of days ago on Monday was probably my most significant interaction with her in the hallways of the courthouse in Salt Lake City, where she was charged and ultimately pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor. She didn't say anything to me. I mean, I wrote her a long letter that I was very, I think, honest in it, and said, I I certainly have moments where I feel bad for you. I definitely have, feel bad for the people that you've interacted with in the last couple of years since you moved here. And we, as I say to almost everyone who I write about, wanted to give her an opportunity to take ownership of her own story, to tell her own story, and not have other people not just have other people tell tell her story.
Yeah.
But yeah, she ran away, and
for real ran away, like literally.
ran. Well, I mean, she didn't run, but she
was
walked
done.
quickly
Trotted.
away from me, and her attorney, her attorney did the whole get out with a hand up, get out. And I said to him, I'm not going to chase her. This isn't the paparazzi. I'm not going to chase her down the hall. I just want to make sure I want to make sure she got my letter, and I want to make sure she knows that we want to hear her side of the story. If she wants to tell her own story, she has a platform to do it with us, but apparently she does not want to do that.
Got you.
It's been a very strange thing because Coco wrote so many things and gave so many interviews and we're on so many podcasts, and part of my job was to gather everything she ever said or wrote down, right? And so people have sent us, one person sent us 600 pages of Facebook messages that were sent back and forth over just a few months. Another person sent us 137, 195. So hundreds and hundreds of pages. She was incredibly prolific. So it feels like I know this person, even though I've never spoken to this person.
So it's like a career.
Oh gosh. Yeah, she was very busy, very busy.
So as journalists, how do you responsibly call somebody out when it's clear that they're not being truthful about their experience?
Yeah, I've definitely been in this situation, by the way, at least twice I can think of off the top of my head, where someone has come to me with an allegation and I simply have not believed it, and I didn't write about them being a liar. Like, I didn't say this person came to me and is trying to put lies out into the world. But I think because she lived her life so publicly and in her stories were already out there, they weren't just being privately disseminated. They were overtly hurting people. I think that's where it was necessary to tell this story and to sort of correct the record. In fact, the reason that Karen and I are doing this story is not because Karen and I were sleuthing around on the internet looking for someone to write about. And I think this has taken over in a way that neither of us necessarily, anticipated. We were already plenty busy before Coco Berthmann. But Dear Media had Coco on their flagship podcast telling her story as she told it. And they felt very strongly that they wanted to correct the record. They didn't want to be like others who were just disappearing the episode or ignoring it and pretending and moving on with their heads in the sand. They wanted to see, is this true or is this not true? And they asked us both to come in and do this. So that was that's the origins of this for Karen and I. And we felt that was the right thing to do, is go out and figure out what about this is correct and what is potentially not.
So Dear Media was essentially a victim of a communication scam, right?
So what is a communication scam?
Well, a communication scam is when you're misrepresenting facts and you're trying to convince people to follow a certain path.
Yeah, and it's really if you use any communication platform to further the cause of a fraud.
Were there any other scams going on?
Coco's real scam was an Affinity scam, which is actually illegal in the state of Utah, but that she was not prosecuted for. Very recently made it illegal.
What is an Affinity scam? What is that?
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's actually affinity fraud, and it's when someone abuses membership or association with an identifiable group like the Mormon Church to convince a potential investor to trust the legitimacy of the investment. So essentially, believe in my story because I'm an LDS church member.
Because I am a survivor of sex trafficking, because I am a member of the LGBTQ community. She pulled various different affinity scams.
Yeah, Utah defines it as religion, ethnicity, profession, education, handicaps, language, age, anything like that. Although this law didn't become law until after she did the things she did.
Affinity scams, that's a slippery slope, but it does make sense.
Because so many of the things that she did are not otherwise illegal, right? It's not illegal to lie to someone.
But the scam that brought everything to your attention was the health scam, correct?
Right.
And then as a result of that, you started looking into the other part of her life.
Yes.
But was anybody really concerned about part 1 until they started to question everything in part 2?
Yeah, there's a journalist, Lynn Packer, in Utah, who is right out of a movie, I have to say. Just everything about him is movie character worthy. But he's a veteran local television reporter. He's been there forever, knows everybody and everything about everybody. And when he got wind of her and her story, he was totally unconvinced and did what he describes as like 2 weeks worth of digging, came up with a ton of stuff, some stuff that we still, after 10 months, have not been able to replicate, and did like a 40-minute YouTube video. And I think he ended up doing a part 2 as well that called some serious question into the original story of being sex trafficked. He talked to her mother and other members of her family and got documents that just called a lot of the timeline into question. And that was out there before she was charged with the GoFund, raising money on a GoFundMe for a fake cancer diagnosis. And that was out there, I think, for a couple of months before.
Oh, that was out there for, almost 6 months before she faked a cancer diagnosis. So the cancer diagnosis was really the desperate thing that she did as she was getting caught.
So it sounds like Anna Sorokin meets Anna Sorokin, the fake heiress, German heiress, and meets Scamanda. I mean, it's like a kind of weird hybrid of a story here. Am I close, or am I?
Yeah, plus religion, minus private jets, kind of.
Wow.
Going back a little bit to the entire concept of an affinity scam, that sounds like a really powerful tool for scammers, just because people tend to trust people within their group or however they identify. At the same time, that sounds like it pales to how scammers can manipulate emotions. How is it that Coco was able to sort of exploit the emotions of the people in her orbit?
Oh my gosh, she had so many tools.
Mm-hmm.
When I was reading through some of her communications, I remember I texted Sara and I'm like, this is how people are indoctrinated into cults, right?
Wow.
Like, it's very much like she would keep people up late at night with panic, drama, wake them up early the next morning with excitement and love and gratitude, and just took them on this absolute roller coaster where they had no time to think about what was actually happening. Like, no time. I kept being like, just do the math, but there was no time to do the math, So she would say that she was raped, then she would say that she was pregnant, then she would say that she went to the doctor, then she would say that she had a miscarriage, and you do the math and you're like, that was 3.5 weeks. There's not enough time for all of those things to have happened. Like, the doctor doesn't see you if you say, I'm pregnant from 2 weeks ago. The doctor says, go away now. Right. So but all of these things were happening so quickly. We started talking about it as like the Coco time warp, right? Like, once she has you in her orbit, time just takes on this very strange cadence because everything is happening so quickly and it's changing so quickly and going up and down and up and down and up and down so quickly that you're completely disoriented.
There were definitely people who saw that kind of story, but because I think she is, I think, a very smart person, Coco is a very smart person. She had already by that time laid such a foundation that people were, I don't know if it was hesitant maybe or nervous to call her out on that, or they just attributed it to some other kind of trauma that, like, okay, that can't be true, but she's clearly dealing with some sort of trauma. She's clearly something terrible has happened to her. And so I'm going to let that go. I'm going to let that slide. I'm not going to call her out on that. And they didn't cut her off or view that as like a terribly huge red flag because she had already laid this foundation of sympathy, and she had already sort of built a fail-safe story in a sense. And I also think it has to do, and this goes back to the Affinity fraud, of the community that she targeted. People who are very, very giving of their time, of their homes, of their space in general. People who are very willing, no matter, what your problem seems to be, to help you, even if they don't fully believe you.
Because they feel that it is their duty, that they feel that that is what they are supposed to do. One person even said to another person, not to us, well, these things might not be true, but she's still a child of God. And it's
100%. And the LDS community, I have a cousin who's LDS, and that is 100%. It really does at the end of the day not matter much what's wrong with you, because what you need is God.
This episode is brought to you by the world's first reposado from Tequila Herradura. Made with slow-cooked, hand-harvested agave sealed into oak barrels and aged 11 months. Before being enjoyed in your glass. Experience the world's first reposado. Tequila Herradura. Please drink responsibly. Responsibility.org. Tequila Herradura. 40% alcohol by volume. Imported by Brown-Forman, Louisville, Kentucky. Herradura is a registered trademark. Copyright 2025 Brown-Forman Corporation.
This episode is brought to you by Nordstrom. Summer's almost out and fall's calling. Luckily, Nordstrom has everything you need for the season ahead, all under $100. Discover new arrivals from your favorite brands like Mango, Princess Polly, Wave, Free People, BDG, and more. Whether you're planning a last-minute getaway, heading back to class, or refreshing your office looks, you'll find the latest trends and beauty must-haves without breaking your budget. It's easy, too, with free shipping, free returns, and in-store order pickup. Shop today, in stores, and at Nordstrom.com.
Sara, you've won a Pulitzer Prize. Karen, you have an Edward R. Murrow Award under your belt, and I'm sure other things. You're both very impressive people, and I want to know, you're not new to stories like this. Did making this podcast make you more cynical? How has it affected you personally?
Yeah, I am a very trusting, believing kind of person. And yes, absolutely. And especially the deeper I got into it. And, as a reporter, you kind of go deeper and then you come back out and see the light again. But when I was reading those 600 pages, and this is episode 2, so this won't be out by the time people can hear episode 2. But while I was reading the 600 pages that we base episode 2 on, it was like 9 hours of reading this and just being like, how can she lie like this? And after that, every interaction with friends, with family, friends would be like, I'm sorry, I can't make dinner. Something came up. And I'd be thinking, did it really? Because her lies just came so easily and so quickly. And for me, it was hard to see that up close.
Yeah. Sara, did this affect your approach to charities or donations or anything like that?
I fear that was ruined for me long before Coco Berthmann.
Okay.
I think the hardest part of this story for me was that normally after you spend 10 months on an investigation, 10 months on a story, you have some sort of resolution. You have some sort of definitive answer. And we don't necessarily have that here. I had to sort of be okay with a lack of resolution at times.
So what do you hope people take away from listening to your podcast?
I think that one of the things that I have in the last couple of years really been focused on in my reporting is like these societal failures. And I think that this story is about that. It's about all of the societal safety nets that failed Coco and failed the people around her.
She pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor, correct?
Mm-hmm.
How did her victims react to the outcome of the plea deal?
Nobody that we interviewed thought that this was like a just outcome. No one felt that justice was served. But we kind of saw this coming too, like from the way that the police investigation was handled all the way through, sitting in the court hearings and witnessing how prosecutors shuffled in and out of this case and kind of weren't necessarily always clued in to the details of it. It was pretty clear this was going through the court system as with Coco Berthmann and her attorney as the driver. So I was not surprised at all to see this as the end of the court case. But I'm married to a defense attorney. I spent a lot of time sitting in court hearings and watching the justice system work. And so this was not surprising to me, but I think it was very, very surprising to a lot of people we interviewed.
There was no trial. There was a hearing with a plea deal. But I think one of the things that's important to point out, and in episode 1, Lynn Packer, that veteran Utah journalist, says this, is that there was a lot more that police could have investigated. There was a lot more that they could have looked into prosecuting. She was getting money as a survivor that she said she was going to be giving to other survivors, that we have found no evidence of it getting to where she said it was going to. She was asking people for money just for herself that nobody has ever tracked. And for whatever reason, the state of Utah decided not to pursue any of that. And Lynn Packer believes that it's because politicians were embarrassed. Many of them had sort of stood beside her and had their photos taken or had spoken of her brave work, right? And they just want this to go away. They don't want to be thinking about it anymore. So I think a lot of the people that Sara is talking about, who we interviewed for this podcast, they're incredibly disappointed because they see what she was prosecuted for as being just a tiny, tiny part of what she did. And the rest of what she did has not been addressed.
Well, it sounds like the damage that Coco had inflicted here was more personal and emotional than it was necessarily criminal. You can't really prosecute someone for hurting your feelings.
Imagine a trial where some of the people that we've interviewed, they get up on the stand and say, well, she made me stay up with her texting all night. Like, what is a jury to do with that? You know, yeah. It's horrible. It's not a nice thing to do. It's not a nice way to treat people.
No.
But is it illegal? Like, I think a good defense attorney would have a field day with that. And you know, then you're putting all of these people through the emotional burden of a trial, and it's potentially not really a crime, and that's all sorts of fraud, right? So,
but I also think that's why she was able to get away with it for so long, right? Because I think people didn't think they were being scammed because they weren't opening up their wallets in the way that we think of, you know, like money wasn't disappearing from their account. And so they thought, oh, she's just hurting. She just needs me. She's just in trouble. I'm here for her.
Right.
And so I think that, I mean, for me, a takeaway, not to tell other people how to feel about this story, but for me, a takeaway is like, money is not the only thing that can be stolen from me.
Yeah, money may not have been leaving their wallets or their accounts, but oxytocin was leaving their bodies.
The funny thing is, like, money was leaving their wallets, but it wasn't going directly into her bank account. It wasn't like, click this link and now you're, you know, you're compromised. Your bank account's compromised. It was like, oh, I need a place to stay. You can stay with me. Like, what's the value of that? I need to get out of Germany right now. What's, you know, okay, I'll buy you a plane ticket. The first thing that comes to mind when people think about being hurt by that request is not the cost of the plane ticket. It's the the day of stress that this person is being chased through, another country, and I need to get them out.
Yeah, they had been thinking about what she had taken from them emotionally for years.
Yeah.
Like they could describe that without us even asking them. But describing what she had taken monetarily, people were sitting down, or we were on the line with some people where they were adding things up, and saying, oh, wow.
But they knew exactly what the emotional impact was.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And also, I think the impact on the work that they were doing. So this particular couple works in the anti-trafficking world, and they saw the impact of someone exaggerating what that is doing to their work, and they were pretty angry about that.
Well, listen, Sara, Karen, we can't thank you enough for sharing your time with us. Speaking on behalf of all of us, I have to tell you, it sounds like a terrific podcast, and it's called
Thanks.
Believable. And where can people find it?
Anywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts, all the usual places, you'll be able to find Believable.
We're looking forward to listening to the podcast, and thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having us.
What's your thought about this interview we just did?
It's just tragic that there are people out there that continue to take advantage of other people, coming up with scam after scam after scam.
Obviously not illegal to be mentally ill or even neurotic. And for me, the whole time I was listening to this story, I was struck by how easy it is these days for somebody who is not okay to be inflicted on others. And I don't know if they're responsible for it any more than the social media platforms they use are responsible for it. I mean, what do you do with somebody who's clearly got problems in a very public forum? To me, that's just deeply problematic. I don't know what to think or feel.
I think one of the biggest things is just to raise awareness that when you see a story online that tugs at your heartstrings, no matter how dark or upsetting it might be, just to always be able to keep in mind that this might not be strictly true.
But then you get into if somebody says they got raped, I'm sorry, I'm not going to say this might not be true. I'm not going to go there.
I mean, that's the truly disturbing thing about it. And I think that's the collateral damage that most people don't consider, is that when someone is willing to lie about a topic like that, then that does a massive disservice to the people to whom that's already happened.
But I think the message it also sends is that whatever story you hear online, you really have to take a moment to reflect upon the story and then decide how emotionally involved or financially involved you want to get.
That's right. Because, you walk down the street and you see people, all the time who aren't doing so great, but you can't stop and help everybody. You just can't.
And even if you do stop and help a number of people, your ability to help them is somewhat limited by your circumstances in life.
I think we're going to see a lot more affinity scams in the future, too, as, it's really no secret that right now our society is incredibly divided. And I think what that means is people are not just putting more distrust toward things outside of their circles, but a lot more trust into the groups that they belong to. And as we found time and again, scammers will exploit any opportunity, and that seems like a big one.
Yeah, and this actually brings us to our tinfoil swan.
Our paranoid takeaway to help keep you safe on and offline. So what's on your mind today, Beau?
Well, it's sort of, I feel it's a little petty, but I just lost an hour of my life.
Oh.
And I wasn't getting scammed. It was to confirm that I wasn't getting scammed. I had to call my bank. So I got a call saying that somebody was writing checks in my name, which I was paranoid about already because we just did a show about it. And it turns out when you call the bank to ask them a question like that, they have different fraud specialists. One's for banking, one's for checking, one's for credit cards, one's for your financial account, I think. It's not one phone call. So there was a lot of being on hold, getting transferred, making sure people who were in different countries understood what I was talking about.
That doesn't sound like very much fun.
Oh yeah, it was definitely not a lot of fun. But it does bring us to the larger point that I feel that a lot of people take for granted.
Which is?
Time. People usually focus on the financial losses from a scam, but the amount of time it takes when you've been targeted by a scammer, even if you haven't been scammed, it really adds up.
Yeah, I think the average amount that it takes to recover or even deal with an identity theft case is 40 hours.
40 hours?
Yeah.
Guys, that's like a full work week. Now, just for a minute, imagine you're an hourly worker, which you're not. And even if you can recoup your money, you're never going to get your time back. And like they say, time is money.
A lot of people need to use up vacation days, PTO, sick days, just to make sure their bank account isn't going to be emptied for real. That's ridiculous. And you know, what else? I guess they got to check the credits intact. Your email hasn't been compromised. Can you imagine giving a day of your life? Like, I mean, also, when you do that, you're actually stealing from your employer because it's paid time. Well, I guess it's paid time off. I mean, so report it that you're doing it because actually you shouldn't be using a vacation day to do it. I don't know. Adam, what would you do if I used a paid PTO to deal with identity theft?
I am Lord Bountiful, so therefore I would be very much in favor of you doing whatever you need to save yourself. Okay?
Oh, yes. So let's talk about what people can do.
Look, first and foremost, you got to have a paradigm shift in the way you think about the stakes of scams and identity theft, right? So when people look at your employment package, you don't just factor in your salary, you factor in your benefits too. So think about getting scammed the same way. It's not about money lost, it's about the time you lose.
Especially if you're in a position where you're living paycheck to paycheck. So even if you don't have a lot of money in the bank, you still need to be diligent about your finances and your accounts because a lost week or even a day could just be a calamity.
Yeah, and if you don't feel like doing it, you don't have to. There's plenty of experts out there who do it. And look, unless you're extremely handy, you hire somebody to fix stuff like plumbing or like a window that needs reglazing. If you don't know what reglazing is, you shouldn't try to fix your window yourself. So there's people who do this for a living. And, you know, they're going to do it better than you are.
Also, Beau, invest a little time in preemptive measures, like install a password manager, set up two-factor authentication in all your accounts. That takes a little time.
Yep.
But compare that. This is like cost-benefit analysis, okay? Compare that to how long it takes to recover those accounts once somebody crawled into those accounts.
Or even how long it took me to like find out that nobody had done anything.
Okay, so freeze your credit, right? That takes a little bit of time, but can help save you a whole lot of time if someone gets into your account, starts setting up new accounts, and also set up a PIN for your tax returns. A little bit of time, but...
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. And I get my IRS PIN every year as soon as I can, and I get it tattooed between my pinky and my index finger. It's very, because it wears off. It does hurt a little bit, but anyway, I just actually write it down on a piece of paper and put it in my safe with my divorce agreement. Anyway, listen, an ounce of prevention will save you a ton of time.
And that's our tinfoil swan. What the Heck with Adam Levin is a production of Loud Tree Media. You can find us online at adamlevin.com and on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Adam K. Levin.
Behind every empire are the people history tried to forget. Lost Roman Heroes tells the stories of the remarkable characters who shaped Rome from its mythical beginnings to its final fall.
Each episode blends armchair storytelling, sharp historical insight, and a bit of humor to bring these lost figures to life. From generals to scientists, from rebels to empresses, from priests to politicians, these lost Roman heroes have one thing in common.
They stood up for civilization when the bad guys threatened, and in doing so, they changed the course of human history. If you're into history that's vivid, surprising, and deeply human, this show's for you.
Behind every great meal is a person with a story to tell. Hear them on Culinary Characters Unlocked, the podcast that reveals the lives behind the food. Hosted by me, David Page, Emmy Award-winning journalist and creator of Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, as I talk with everyone from culinary legends to mom-and-pop standouts about the creativity, grit, and passion that shape the food we love. Follow Culinary Characters Unlocked on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.